Okay, we're going to look at the sine, cosine, and tangent ratios and now actually how to use them on a triangle. So sine, cosine, tan are the relationship between the sides of a right triangle and their angles. And so depending on what sides you have and what angle you have determines which ratio you would use. So on a triangle, the longest side is the hypotenuse. And so we label that with the letter H. This is the angle they gave me. So based on that angle, this side is opposite it. It's not touching it, so it is opposite the angle they gave me. So I'm going to call this side opposite. And I usually use the short form O. The side that's touching it, not the hypotenuse, but the side that's touching the angle, is known as the adjacent side. And we label that with an A. Adjacent means next to. Opposite means opposite the angle, nothing to do with the right angle, opposite the other angle. And then hypotenuse is the longest side. From there, we can make ratios. So the sine ratio is the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse side. The cosine ratio is the adjacent side divided by the hypotenuse side. And the tan ratio is the opposite side divided by the adjacent side. So if I look at these triangles, what I want to do is I just want to figure out what side is which before we actually get into the work. So this is the angle they gave me. This is the longest side. So this is H. That is my hypotenuse. This is the side opposite my X. It's not touching it, so that's my opposite. Which leaves this to be my adjacent. It's the side touching it that is not the hypotenuse. If I look at the next one, same thing. This is the angle they gave me. So this is the hypotenuse. It is the longest side. This is the opposite. It is the side that doesn't touch the angle. This is adjacent. It is the side that touches the angle that is not the hypotenuse. Lastly, this triangle, C. There's the angle they gave me. This is the hypotenuse. It's the longest side. This is the side that's touching it, so this is the side that's opposite. And this is adjacent. So a nice thing we like to use to help us remember which ratio goes with which trigonometric function is SOHCAHTOA. So we like to use SOHCAHTOA. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. And tan is opposite over adjacent. So let's figure out how this works. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to label our triangle. So there's the angle they gave me. This is the longest side, which is the hypotenuse. This is the opposite of the angle, and this is the adjacent. So I have the hypotenuse, and I'm looking for the opposite, which means I don't really care about adjacent. So I'm looking for which ratio where I have opposite and hypotenuse. So that would mean that I would need my sine ratio. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write down my formula. So I'm going to write that sine, and I'm going to change it to theta. Theta is a Greek letter, is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. So this is a Greek letter that we often use to represent an angle. It helps us so we don't get confused with all the letters. So then what I want to do is I want to plug in what I know. So I can say, well, this is sine of 30 degrees, because that was my angle. This gets represented for my angle. The opposite side is x, and the hypotenuse is 10. So now what I do is I get to cross multiply. So this is really like over a 1. So 1 times x is still x. And this is sine 30 and 10. So I'm going to multiply them. We always put the side in front of the trig ratio. So then I can say x is equal to, and then at this point I just plug it into my calculator. So I'm going to say 10 sine bracket 30 degrees close bracket. And then I'm going to hit equal. And I get 5 as my answer. So I'm going to say 5 meters. If you have a different type of calculator, you're going to have to do 30 sine times 10 equals. And you're going to have to work backwards. Okay, I'm going to repeat that. If you have a different type of calculator, you're going to do 30 sine times 10 equals to get your 5.